Today is December 2nd. I forgot to record Algebra 1A yesterday and today in first period. So I'm just creating a real quick video. I'm actually going to add some stuff to it that I don't think I did in class, but important stuff. I'm pretty much just going over everything that's going to be on the next quiz. So should help everybody. So we talked about X and Y intercepts really quickly. I'm going to review that. I don't specifically have anything like this on the quiz, but there is some stuff about graphing using X and Y intercepts. Just remember, an X-intercept is where the line crosses the X-axis. So that is the X-intercept. The Y-intercept is where it crosses the Y-axis. That is the Y-intercept. I'm not going to do it for every other line. What was important, though, is we said every intercept, whether it's X or Y, every single one is going to have a 0 in it. And then we said, okay, well, if every intercept has a 0 in it, sometimes 0 will be first, sometimes 0 will be second. I can tell which kind of intercept it is by where the 0 is, or really where the number is. So for example, I'm going to go up to the red line. My Y-intercept is that number right there, 1. Well, what is the ordered pair for that? Well, my left and right number, my X, is always the first number. So I don't go left or right at all. If I want to go up to this point right here, I'm still talking about that. If I want to go up to that point, I don't go left or right. So my first number is a 0. So for the Y-intercept, I write a 0. My second number, I go up to 1. So I go up that way to 1. So my second number is a 1. Again, that's just how you put a point on a graph or how you label a point on a graph. So that would be 0, 1. I don't go left or right, so the first number is 0. I go up to 1, so the second number is a 1. Now I could do that for every Y-intercept. I'm going to do it really quickly. So for the blue line, the Y-intercept is 0, 3. I don't go left or right, and I'm going to use red for every single one, so it's not going to be color coordinate or anything. For the green line, I don't go left or right, so it's 0, -2. And for the black line, which we actually can't see, it is 0, -4. Now for the X-intercepts, I do the same thing, only if you'll notice for the X-intercept, I have to go either left or right first. Then I don't go up or down for the second number. So for example, for this X-intercept, I go right to the number 2. So my first number is 2. I don't go up or down, so my second number is 0. For the black line, I go left to -4. So there's the X-intercept. I go left to -4. So my first number is -4. I don't go up or down, so my second number is 0. For the green line, I go right to 3, and then I don't go up or down. For the blue line, I go right to 1, and then I don't go up or down, so it's a 0. Again, every single intercept has a 0 in it. All you have to look at to know if it's an X or a Y intercept is where is the non-zero number. For every X intercept, the number part, the non-zero number, will be the X number. It'll be the first number. So here I can highlight it. So in the X intercepts, that's always the non-zero number, the X value, the first number. The 0 is always the second number. For a Y-intercept, the 0 is always the first number, and the second number is always the Y-intercept. So that's how you tell if something is an X-intercept or a Y-intercept. It'll have a 0 in it, and then wherever the non-zero number is, that's the kind of intercept it is. If the non-zero number is in the X, then it's an X-intercept. If the non-zero number is in the Y, then it's a Y-intercept. I don't think I did that in class, but went over it real fast. So this was the next thing we did. You have to know how to create a table Sometimes I might give you the values to use. Sometimes you might create them on your own. If I give you a table, you can choose any values you want. If I tell you to create it using the X and the Y intercepts, that's when you have to pick specific value. I'm going to abbreviate it, but that's X and Y intercepts. If I say create it using X and Y intercepts, you have to choose 0 for X, because remember, every intercept has a 0 in it. And then you have to choose 0 for Y, because it has to have a 0 in it. Now you just plug those in and solve. If I plug 0 in for X, well, 0 plus 2 is 2, so Y equals 2. I'm going to go fast. You can always pause it and go back and rewind it if you need to. If I choose 0 for Y, well, what does X need to be? If I need to get 0 out of this X plus 2, well, X would have to be -2. That would give me 0. So those are the two intercepts. If you'll notice, if I graph them, I've already graphed them. They are right on the X-axis and right on the Y-axis. That's how you graph using the intercepts. If I just tell you to create a table, then you can plug in any numbers you want. But if I specifically say using the X and Y intercept, you have to plug in 0 for X and then also later plug in 0 for Y. All right, so what else did we do? There's one you can try to do on your own. I've given you the numbers to use there. These will be intercepts. So that will be an intercept. I want you to try to figure out which intercept these are. They both have a 0, so they have to be an intercept. Pause it and figure out which kind of intercept it is. Even if you don't have a number there, you should be able to figure it out. So you should be back now. If the value for X is the non-zero number, then it is the X-intercept. If the value for Y is the non-zero number, then it is a Y-intercept. All right. So I'm not going to solve those out. You can try to do it on your own. We also did that, I think, the other day. You basically just plug in the value of X and then the value of Y. So that would be X. I just changed X to 4. So I just took 4 and replaced X. 2X means 2 times X. So now it becomes 2 times 4. And then you still have to subtract 4. So if I say 8 subtract 4, that point is 4. That point is 4, 4. You can do the other ones. All right, so that's more stuff you can use. That's a book page. These are the practice pages you need to know how to do. We also did practice pages where you use the X and the Y intercept to graph. I just went over how to do that. That was really a review for the other quiz that people need to retake. That's old. That's not anything you need to know. All right, so here's the new stuff. Rate of change. We filled in the table. I said, and we've done this before, so this is not new. Anytime your X values are going up by 1, so all of those X's are going up by 1. If they are going up by 1, then if there is a pattern in the Y values, if they are going up by the same amount or even down by the same amount, that is that number, whatever the pattern number is, that's the rate of change. So for this problem, the rate of change is 2. Now, it's easy to do that when everything's going up by 1. So all of these are going up by 1. The problem comes in, and we did this before. This is not new. Problem comes in when X's are not going up by 2. The X's are not going up by 2. I cannot just subtract and figure out if there's a pattern right now. That only works when the X's are going up by 2 and they're not. Now, the way I showed you how to do this is we created a table, a new table, and we filled in all the values we know, and then we figured out the other values we could use. So that's X, by the way, that's Y. So 2 right here goes with 5. So the Y value is 5. Now I'm going to use 5 and 14. So for 5, the Y is 14. For 9, it's 26. I'm not going to circle the other ones. There. So that's what we know. Now we said since all of my x's are now going up by 1, I'm adding 1 every time as I go down, plus 1 every time. If I can come up with a pattern in the y values, that pattern number will be the rate of change. It's also the slope, but we'll talk about that more next week. I could try by just adding the same number over and over and seeing if it works. So if I add 1 to 5, I get 6. If I add 1 to 6, I get 7. Well, if I add 1 to 7, I get 8, not 14. So that doesn't work. I have to land on 14 when I get to the spot where 14 is. So let's add 2. That will give me 7. That will give me 9. Well, now I get 11. So adding 2 doesn't work. Let's add 3. 8 plus 3 is 11. Oh, now if I add 3, I do get 14. So if I add 3, 17, 20, 23. Oh, and I get 26. So adding 3 works. Every single time, if I create a table using a pattern of 3, it works out. So positive 3, now that I'm going up by 1 here, my pattern number is the rate of change. That's kind of a lot of work. I know some of you are kind of lazy, so that's kind of a lot of work. There is a shorter version of that. Now it involves memorizing some stuff, and I'm not big on memorizing, but it's not horrible, and you're also going to memorize this for other stuff. So there's a formula for slope, which is actually the same thing as the formula for rate of change. You've learned it before. It's not new. You may not remember it well. It's this. This is the formula for slope or formula for rate of change. If I use that formula, I should have erased everything first. Oh. If I use that formula correctly, it will always work no matter what the table looks like, if there is a rate of change. So if it is a linear equation, all you have to do is you pick any 2 columns you want. Or if the table is a vertical table like this, I'd pick any 2 rows. Like I could pick that row and that row. If it's more horizontal like this, I could pick that column and that column. All you're doing by picking the columns is you're just saying, this is my first point, this is my second point. And I could have flipped that. I could have made 5 and 14 my second point, and 11 and 32 my first point. It would still work. These 2's and 1's in this equation down here, all they're doing is they're just referring to either the first point or the second point. So I would suggest that you label either right in the table, or if you want to somehow separately, like I think in class, I showed them how to write the ordered pair down and then label it in the ordered pair, which I think we've done before in other classes. I'm going to label it right in the table. So if this is my first point, 5, 14, I would just say this is the first x, because I'm in the x row, right? That's the x row, so it's got to be an x value, 5. And it's the first point, so it's got to have an x1. This would be y1, because I'm in the y row, and it's the first point. All the little 1 means is those are the values for the first point. There's not math. The 1's don't mean math. This then, for my second point, would be x2, y2. Again, all the little 2's mean is that's my second point. So that's my second x and my second y. Now you just plug them into the equation. I would write the equation every single time. It helps you remember it. So my y2 value is 32, just pulling it straight from what I just labeled. Subtract y1 is 14, divided by my x2 is 11, just pulling it straight from where I labeled it in the table. And then my x1 is 5. Now you just do the math. 32 subtract 14 would be 18. So I'm going to kind of come down here. 18 divided by 11 subtract 5 is 6. If you simplify that, you get 3, which we already figured out earlier is the rate of change. So this method will work for any table as long as it's still a linear equation. We did book problems. I don't know that I have them in this. If I don't have them in here, I think I have them in the other thing. We haven't done that yet, so don't freak out about that. Here, let me just go to the book pages. Yeah, so here I told them to do, I'll zoom in a second. I said do problems 1 and 2 for sure. Oh, can't do it on the screen there. Do problems 1 and 2 right there. So there's 2 tables. You're just figuring out the rate of change. Oh, by the way, when you pick your 2 points from the table, I would avoid using negatives. So I would not pick this. Like, don't pick that because of the -3. If there are no negatives, I would pick the smallest numbers possible. So I wouldn't use 15 and 20. I would pick these 2 rows here because they have the smallest numbers. And then you could, like, using that concept, if you can avoid using decimals and avoid using fractions, that's probably a good idea also. So since you get to pick any 2 columns you want or any 2 rows, depending on how the table looks, just pick the easiest numbers to work with. And that was pretty much everything I think on the next quiz.